I'm considered what they call a personnelist, which has multiple components under that. So we're kind of the jack of all trades. We do, if you were to translate from the civilian sector to what we do in the military, it's more of the business and HR piece of how we do business. So when I trained up, I was trained up on three components. The first being personnel, which is more of the HR piece, manpower, which when you're looking at billets, authorizations, and how to fill requests, that's something that we need to know, and it ties in with personnel. And the last being services. And I will say that services is a hard one. It has everything to do with supporting families, cradle to grave. My career field works primarily with mortuary. So I have worked a lot of active duty deaths, have seen a lot. And I will say that, and with kind of alluding to some of the questions moving forward in the interview, it is life-changing to be able to say that we support families who are grieving their fallen members, but we get to really prepare them and I guess support them in a way that most people in the military do not get to. So that is one of the most rewarding things that I get to do in my career field.
That's got to be hard and challenging, but yet rewarding all at the same time. It's got to be such a flood of emotions because you're dealing with people on what are some of their worst days in their lives when they've lost somebody. So talk to us. I know I didn't ask that, but just as a follow-up to what you were saying, talk to us about what is that like for you to work with people on not their best day, and how do you handle that emotionally as well?
Great question. So I think in life, having that emotional intelligence and working on that, because it's not something that's always just given to us. We're not all naturally good at understanding people's emotions and where they come from. But understanding the idea of empathy and compassion is huge. And that's obviously a huge foundation in what we do in the military. We're service, like we are serving other people every single day. In the Air Force, it's integrity first, service before self. Excellence in all you do. So with that being the foundation of what you do, you just learn so much about how important it is to put yourself in someone else's shoes. What are they going through? If I were to go through that, if I lost my child, if I lost my husband, what if I lost my wife? Like, what if I were in that situation? How would I want someone to take care of me? And I think really putting yourself in that moment and saying, I need someone that is compassionate, understanding, empathetic, but someone that's also direct enough to really tell me what I need to hear. Someone that's patient, someone that's able to deal with the emotional response that I may not even know might come out of, my brain cells, right? Like, you don't know when you grieve. You don't know what's going to happen. People do crazy things, So with that, I think how I deal with that is mostly just putting myself in someone else's shoes and then just kind of thinking, you know what, grace and compassion, because sometimes people are angry. Sometimes that's their primary grieving mechanism, right? And you just can't take it personally. You just can't. Like, it is truly about putting them before you, right? So I think that's the first part, is when I'm managing these situations and managing the emotions of other people, the first step is just remembering that I don't know what they're going through, and I'm not going to pretend that I do, but I will do my best to understand. So I will try to. I'll ask the questions. I will read their body language. I'll go through all of that. But if they're angry, guess what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to take it personally, right? It's I. So that's the first step. And then how do I deal with it emotionally? So I'm an immigrant kid. My parents came here from India over 30 years ago. So, I was kind of taught at an early age how to compartmentalize. But I'm not saying that's necessarily something that most people can do. I am extremely, when it comes to death and loss, my heart, I legitimately feel that pain. That is something that physiologically hurts me, right? But in the dynamic of, I know this is how I'm feeling, I have to have the selflessness to say, it does not matter right now how I'm feeling when I'm in front of this family, right? You have to be able to separate that and say, I am here for you, and how I feel right now is important, but I'm going to deal with that in the proper mechanisms, whether that be through disaster mental health, or if that's going through a counselor. I have to go be brave enough and vulnerable enough to say, I'm going to get help. And there is nothing shameful about saying, and especially wearing the uniform, there's nothing shameful about saying, I need help because what I'm seeing is drastically different than what I think someone just normally going to the business world would see, right? It's trauma. I legitimately deal with trauma every day. So with that, I guess I deal with it where when I'm in front of these families and I'm loving on them, it's genuinely about them, right? But when I go off and I'm dealing with this on a personal level, I make sure that I talk about it. And a lot of people, we talk about PTSD, we talk about trauma. When it starts to spiral is when you don't take care of yourself in that. And it is terrifying to deal with your personal emotions. It is terrifying to look in the mirror and be like, man, that was horrible, right? And I have seen things, it's like, sometimes it's a horror film, right? The things that you see and the remains that you see, things like that. It's something that I need to work through. I have to understand that there is a process of grieving for myself, right? So to answer your question, kind of a long answer, but it's twofold, threefold. There's so many components to it. But I do try to separate when it comes to dealing with the families and loving on them. And then when it comes back to me, how do I love myself, right? Like, how do I treat myself with care and compassion? So then when the next one happens, because it does, how am I equipped to be able to handle that with strength?
So can I just follow up? I think that, most of our students know, I certainly know to a degree, like that you could pay the ultimate price by choosing to go to serve your country. And you've had a chance to see that in a very unique and different way. You deal with probably most of the losses, right, that are occurring in the Air Force. Had that changed your perspective? Like, as you think pre-military, before you went in, knowing that, yes, that's a risk, to actually seeing the reality, I would love to just hear how that's, impacted you or how your thought process has changed.
Absolutely. Great question. These are awesome. So, I mean, bluntly, it changes my life, right? It changed my life from what I thought my future would look like as soon as I wore this uniform, because I think we, as young people, we think we're invincible, right? We think that we could do anything, we could take all these risks, we could do all of this, and we're Gucci, we're fine, we're going to live forever, right? And that is not true. And I'll tell you, it started when I was in ROTC at Miami University of Ohio, and my best friend, who was in the Navy ROTC unit, he passed away suddenly. He was 19 years old. He died in a car crash, right? And it kind of was the first glimpse into the reality that we are not invincible. So how has it changed my perspective? Well, in dealing with this every single day, it makes me live my life very differently. And with that being said, tomorrow is not guaranteed. So I think it's so important when we think about the things in life that make us anxious and worried, just remembering that if you can look in the mirror every single day and you can say that you gave your all and you gave it with, and I say love and I say compassion, but you do it in a way where you find true positive fulfillment. I think that's what's really changed in my life, where I'm not worrying about, what if. It's today I'm going to do my best. Today I'm going to make a difference. Today I'm going to love hard. Because what I've seen is and I've been deployed. I was in Africa for my last deployment, for my next one. You see someone one day that you're, shaking hands with, hugging it out, and the next day they're gone, right? And that's because, and they know, so my idea of this too is, when I go, I know that I may not come home, right? I know that. And that is something where it requires so much bravery that not everyone has when they even wear the uniform. It's terrifying, right? It's terrifying. You get out there, mortar attacks, or things that happen that you cannot predict. But my point in sharing that is, I think we have to be careful too about not living in fear. Because if we live in fear, it only prohibits us from living a fulfilling life. So to answer your question, I think I go through my life trying to be cautious of certain things, because that's wise, but also realizing that there's no reason to fear certain things, because that just takes control over you. Like today, we have a chance to make a difference. So let's live that life that way. I don't know if that makes sense, but kind of how my mind has changed over the years.
I know that makes complete sense. So you mentioned you were ROTC at Miami of Ohio. So what made you, when you left NEQA, did you have that path in mind? Did you say, you know what, when I leave here, I'm going ROTC at Miami of Ohio, and then eventually I want to get into the Air Force? Did you have that plan in mind, or what was your thought process on your plan to get you to where you are now?
So, no, ma'am, that was not my plan.
Okay.
This was never really something I thought I would do, right? Like, and I will say, culturally, living in Illinois, growing up in the Chicagoland area, we don't really hear much about the military. We just don't. It's not highly advertised. I mean, scholarships, if I would have known about certain scholarships, I probably would have applied for them. Like, I had no clue. I'm an immigrant kid that knows nothing about the military, and I heard about this Air Force thing, right? And my mom was like, well, you're going out of state to Miami of Ohio, and that's going to be pretty expensive. So you may want to figure out another way to get that paid for, right? Which, obviously appreciate that. She did so much to support me through that, but I needed to do what I needed to do to get myself through college, right? So I did not know that I would join Air Force ROTC, to put it that way. But I remember thinking, my mom said this to me. She goes, you need that discipline in your life. And I was like, oh, okay. Thanks, Mom. And it's funny because I think she literally thought that it would just be like summer camp and I would go get trained up to be like a military officer. And then I remember when I'm commissioning my senior year, and she's like, I didn't think you're actually going to join the Air Force. Well, what do you think I was going to do? So it was funny because I think my plan going in was, going to an amazing school like NEQA, having I was in AP classes, I did bio, did chem, all of that. I had the vision of what a typical immigrant old Indian kid is told when they're growing up, like, you got to be a doctor, you got to be a pharmacist, So I think I was like, that was my mindset. I'm going to be a doctor or pharmacist. And I did my pre-med requirements. I did all of my gen ed stuff, and I did well, but there was just something that kept pulling me back to ROTC. I loved it. It changed my life. I saw things that I was never exposed to. And I think I just had to make a choice, right? I had to make a choice probably with my sophomore, junior year of college, where I was like, I think this is my calling. So to answer your question, I originally went in with a plan of making my family proud by being a doctor. And then I had to really do some self-discovery and think through what am I going to be passionate about when I leave university, right? So at the end of it, I commissioned, did really well in ROTC and in college, and ended up just getting springboarded to some amazing opportunities, active duty. So I will say that this was definitely part of the plan, I think, in my life, and I'm super grateful for it.
And I'm sure you still are making your parents proud.
Yeah. Well, you're making us proud. I can tell you that for sure. So I really appreciate that. And I love that you're sharing a story that's different than just a traditional 4-year college experience, and then maybe to go on to postgraduate, work. Your experience was different than that. I'm just really curious too, not to get personal, but as you think about the financial assistance, talk us through that a little bit. I mean, that is a huge benefit that our armed services provides, is the opportunity to help take care of some of your schooling. Could you just walk us through how that worked for you?
Yes, absolutely. So we get scholarships. Not everyone does, but we get scholarships based on merit, based on the degree that you decide to choose. And during my time, I don't know if you guys remember, it was like 2011, they started to draw down funding for the government. So my class actually lost all their scholarships. So that was an interesting thing, because I went in originally to get money out of it, right? And then it really tested my dedication, loyalty as to why I was doing it, because everyone in my class did not have a scholarship. And we were like, you know what? Let's just get jobs. Let's just figure it out. So here we are going through university, doing the military thing, and we all had jobs because we loved what we were doing. Normally, though, That's not the norm. That is absolutely abnormal. Normally, you'll apply to a program, you'll have a degree, and you get to compete for scholarships. And sometimes it pays for all of your tuition. That's from the college standpoint. If you decide to just do ROTC or OTS, which is Officer Training School, but if you decide you want to enlist, you can still enlist and go through the Guard or reserves and still go to university. And the Guard and reserves may have different programs where they pay for your school while you're doing it. But the only thing about that is you have to be ready to deploy at any point. So you might get pulled out of school if you get tasked, because technically you're enlisted and you're at their disposal, but they're still paying for school. So what you would think is like a 4-year experience, if you decide to enlist and get that money, may end up being a little longer, because you'd have to take a pause to go serve your country. But there are a lot of different ways to get money. One thing that I was able to do, I got my master's right away. So I went in, and since we were not allotted that money during my undergrad, I was able to tap into my post 9/11 GI Bill right away. So I paid for my whole master's. I went in residence or in school in St. Louis when I was stationed there. So it paid for all my master's. We have tuition assistance. So I was able to do my master's immediately without paying really anything. So hopefully that kind of answered your question when it comes to the funding piece.
Thank you.
Yeah, It's nice that you got it paid for.
I was like, at least one of these degrees, come on.
So you mentioned you're deploying soon. So while I understand you probably can't share a lot of nitty gritty details and all that kind of stuff, but talk to us a little bit about what is it like to deploy? Because people think, oh, you're deploying, you're going to a combat zone, but that's not necessarily the case. So
Correct.
Talk to us about what it means to deploy and kind of what that experience is like.
Okay. So I'm super lucky with this second deployment that's coming up, because I was in a combat zone in my first one down in Africa. And that was something where you can be either restricted to a compound, and you're basically a support function for the folks that are sent out to certain areas for the mission. So as kind of cryptic as possible, but the point is I serve a support function there, and you have to be in close proximity to filter information to them and things like that. And that's really what the combat usually looks like. And you don't normally leave the base or compound. In that case, I was lucky I was able to. So in my first deployment, it was amazing. I'm a person of faith. Like, I was like, God, you're so cool. Like, he gave me the chance to literally hold little babies in Africa. Like I got to, like, I loved it, man. Like that, my heart was so full. So while I was there, I got to do like the mission, but I also got to volunteer. So I volunteered at a women's shelter and an orphanage. And I got to spend my time giving back in so many different ways. That's not always the norm. But because of the climate change there, I was able to leave the wire, if that makes sense. Now, in the second deployment that I'm going to, I'm going to serve more as a higher level of a support function for they call it the AFRICOM. It's a combatant command, so it's the Africa Command function. So I'll basically be able to see all of the units that support Africa from where I'm going. And it's not going to be in Africa, I'm going to be in Europe. But I get to see it from a higher level. What are all the mission sets that we have on that continent? So that's going to be pretty neat to basically have a different perspective going in. And I would be working the manning piece, so they have requirements for certain mission sets and making sure that you have the right people in the right jobs to say there is an incident. How do you respond to that? So we really get to be part of the whole design piece on how to support all these different mission sets that we have downrange. And some people could argue you might be able to do it at home station, but it's very different when you're deployed, because you're solely focused for 6 to 12 months to that mission. And they're long hours. I mean, sometimes you're working 12 to 14 hour days, right? And that's but it's rewarding. And I think the whole point of that deployment is to get saturated in that information and saturated in that environment, so you can solely be dedicated and loyal to that. If you're at home station, there's obviously conflict with family and friends and things like that, where you're not able to give that all. So it is helpful when, if someone were to make the argument, well, why can't you just do those jobs at home station? Well, no, they literally need it. It's like almost 24/7. So that's where it's, let's pick you up and let's put you in a different location to focus on that mission.
Yeah, that makes sense, because that way you can focus 100%, on them and things like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How has the pandemic affected the military? I mean, obviously with the deployment, because you're going to another country, I don't know that they're really going to make you quarantine for 14 days, like a civilian would have to be, or things like that. But how has the pandemic affected you and other active military members?
It has impacted us hugely. It has absolutely changed how we do business, who comes to work. We have an installation of civilians, contractors, and military personnel here, all from different branches. And it is interesting because when you're used to having thousands of people on base, it's like a ghost town. So the installation commander gets to make this decision based on the risk that he's willing to take on COVID, and saying, you know what, we're not having our civilians come in, or we're not having our contractors come in. And these are, we call mission essential military members that come in. So I've been mission essential since, I've been here. So I've always been coming to work, but I would say 80% of the people in my unit have not been. They've been teleworking. So that has changed how we communicate. We do Zoom calls and Teams meetings all the time. And it's really tested our ability to connect. And that's huge in my career field, obviously, with mortuary and working with families. So it adds a dynamic that we were not prepared for, but it tells us that we need to get creative, right? And you can still connect and you can still get the job done behind a screen. But we're looking forward to, we're calling it a recovery stage 2, where we can start bringing people back slowly because the risk has now lessened here. But I think with that, it is definitely something where everyone, you deal with emotions of fear of like, okay, now we're at exposure again. What if we have to go back to recovery stage 1? Like, it's obviously complicated, right? But at the end of the day, it has impacted our ability to connect in person, but we've overcome it because we have to. You just have to. And I will say that it is hard to get some things done for the job, but it just means you push a little harder and you find a different way to I guess there's multiple ways to skin a cat. So you kind of use that philosophy and you do it. So hopefully that answers your question.
You talked earlier about one of your proudest moments and the reward that you get with working with families. Do you have any other proud moments or great accomplishments that you want to share with our students?
Yeah, so one of the things, because mortuary is one of those like unsaid and just understood experiences that you just learn so much about how you as an individual can impact families, and how just by being kind, it goes a long way. So I will say that's definitely my proudest moment. And I've had multiple deaths that I've worked, the first being a suicide on base. And that's one thing that I think it's so important that we don't shy from that conversation. Suicide is a real risk factor to people of all ages and all walks of life, right? So if we don't address that, it's super important that we realize that there are implications of staying silent on that. So one thing that I think was pretty cool after my first experience, it was actually a friend of mine from work who had killed himself, and I had worked intimately in that recovery process with his wife, and just kind of, literally cleaning up the mess, right? And with that, I was able to go use those skills and go to Africa. And we called a wingman day. The Air Force did the stand down because of suicide. So one of the projects that we did with some of the Air Force folks, and we invited the sailors and soldiers, was a wingman day. And it was to talk about suicide and that it's real, and that it is so important that we are connected, and tying this back into the complexity of what COVID has done to us. Isolation can do things to people, right? So I would say one of the proudest things that I've done in a deployed environment was getting people from all over the world that I don't even know and saying, you know what, let's get together and start taking care of each other. And this is what we need to start talking about. And turn out great. I mean, it was interesting. The general at the time that was there came out, kind of sat in with us. He was a 2-star, and he ended up going to Capitol Hill, and he met with the Secretary of Defense, and he did mention that we were doing this. He's like, hey, my unit back in Africa, they're doing this and we're supporting that. So I think it was just cool to see that our efforts don't go unseen. And it's not even about being seen. That doesn't even matter. It's about really knowing that people care about connection and preventing tragedies from happening. And I think it's important to get that out there. So that was probably one of my my bigger moments while I was deployed. And then just, like I mentioned, volunteering in Africa and working with the kiddos and the women there was just, I mean, amazing. Literally meeting kids from Yemen and Somalia and just loving on them. It's freaking awesome, right? So I think it's just, you know, you get to do cool things. So I think with that, those are some of the big ones. I think the last one that I did, that last mortuary case, was a freak accident here at Crab Island in Destin, Florida, and dealing with one of our guys. Being able to put his uniform on, right, like for the last time while he's in his casket and getting him ready for his spouse, I would say was a pretty proud moment, because we got to make him look the way that they remembered him. And we got to send him home with the flag and dignity. And I think being as intimately involved in that one really helped me tie all the things that I've seen and done the last couple of years together to see, you know what, like, we get to honor him, and he gets to, I mean, he's going to be honored forever because of that. And we get to help his family feel like they are not alone, even when it seems like people don't always want to take care of them. That's the difference about the civilian world. And no hate on that, but the civilian world usually doesn't give that care to families as much. Someone loses, that's so up to the member's relationship with their teammates to do that. But the military has an amazing system in place to make sure that anytime someone passes, an active duty member or uniform member, their family is taken care of. So I think that's just really cool. I'm pretty proud to be part of that.
Yeah, that's got to be an amazing feeling to help all those families out.
Mm-hmm.
One of the last questions we have, because we want to respect your time here, for those students who we have who are thinking of joining the military, whether it be enlisting, ROTC, or going to an academy, what advice would you give to them?
So I have friends from all walks of becoming a military member, whether they're enlisted at OTS, OCS, they decide they want to go to a professional program and it's like an 8-week officer course, whatever the case may be. I've met them all, and I would say that whatever choice that they make, I think it's so important that they talk to people who know what it's like to serve, and get different perspectives. And just like you're writing a research paper, don't just take one perspective. Everyone has a different opinion about what they do. So what I wouldn't want is for someone to say, well, I talked to this person about their experience, and they told me not to do it because of A, B, C, and D. Or this person had such a great experience and it was only this. Well, okay, the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? And I say that, whereas like they have to get data from all points. And I think it's just talk to people, right? And see, is this life what I want to live? And I will say it has been an adventure for me, but I like change. So I have to be self-aware of, I need to be pushed. I need to have adventure. I like being uncomfortable. Because I think personally, it's like David Goggins, like you better get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's the only way you can get better. So I think that's a huge part for me, where it's, you have to know yourself. And then by identifying it, we'll never arrive there, right? Every day it's a journey to figure out who you are. And we change and we grow and we develop. But my point is, for the advice of people that are trying to see if this is for them, I would say get to know people who are in the service from different branches, see their experiences, do research online on different, missions that we've done, whether it's the Air Force, a joint environment, Air Force, Army, Marines, and Navy, Coast Guard even. No one talks about the Coast Guard, but they exist. It's like the Space Force. I don't know if anyone's watched the Space Force show on Netflix, but like, you know, there are a lot of people that come to the table, right? And different perspectives and different cultural components. So I would say that doing research on each of the heritage, I guess the heritages for the Air Force or the Navy, and we're all so different. And now we have Space Force. We're so different. So I think they need to do the research on that. But I will say, I always think there's something life-changing about serving in some capacity. So whether it's being a reservist, active duty, guardsman, there's so many ways you can serve and still have a normal life. When I say normal, whatever normal means. But having, you know, you can still have a family, you can still travel the world, you can still do all of these things while serving. It's just about your attitude and mentality about it. So I would just say, if people are afraid of not being able to do certain things in life, they can still serve and still do it. And that would be my encouragement to them. But serving isn't for everyone. There are different ways you can serve. It doesn't have to be in the military. So I guess I would just say, do your research, ask a lot of questions, get different perspectives, watch Space Force. Just kidding. But yeah, on a serious note, do your research.
Great advice. Dave, do you have anything else?
No, I think I asked the follow-up questions, and this has been fascinating. I did not know that that's how you were serving, was in the field of mortuary. So to hear you, this was a brand new insight for me. This opened up my eyes in a lot of ways. So I appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today, and for us to get a better chance to hear about the great work that you're doing and the support that you're giving our military families. So thank you so much.
Oh, good. It is a blessing. I am absolutely honored to be able to do it.
Absolutely.
Is there anything you think we've missed that we need to share with our students? You covered so much, and I don't know how I'm going to cut this down.
Yeah, this has got to get edited to about 3 minutes, so we'll see.
I think that everything is probably embedded in my long-winded answers from the questions. But my biggest thing is like, life is precious, man. Like, live it well. I always say that to the airmen that I supervise. Life is precious. It is short. Live it well. And when it comes to doing things that fulfill you, I think it takes some serious self-reflection to consider what people are willing and I guess considers worth doing in life to make a difference. But I think it's important that everyone thinks about how they play a role in the world, whether it's wearing the uniform or not. I think it's important that they self-reflect. So if the students can start thinking about that, they're the future. They are the future. And we need people who care about the world around them. So that's all. That's all I got.
Oh, it's a great way to end it. Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah, you wrapped it up right there. I'm cheering. I'm like, yes.
Okay. Yep. That's all. We're good. Yeah.
All right.
Krystal, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. We wish you all the best, and we wish you Godspeed for when you deploy. We wish you health and safety, and hope you come back to us in one piece.
Yeah, we're proud of you.
Yes.
Thank you. Y'all take care. It's good to see you.
Thanks.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Krystal. Be safe.
Yes, thanks. Bye.
Take care.